Have you ever had those problems that just seem to eat your lunch? This is one of them, and this should be simple. I've been going 10 rounds with the cooling system on my El Camino, and here's what I found. So aside from it being winter and I'm running water only in this cooling system because drag car, most tracks don't like seeing antifreeze on their track, the start of this whole project came around when I decided to swap off the dual plane Edelbrock Performer intake for that beautiful AFR single plane intake. Intake manifold swap, pretty basic, should be quick, right? When I pulled it apart, I noticed that the thermostat that was in there came out in 3 different pieces. No big deal, probably shouldn't reuse thermostats anyways. So I got some new ones. So I got another high flow, just like the one that was in there, because what I had worked, right? So before I go too much further, thermostat housing gaskets. If you are doing anything with your thermostat housing, changing thermostats for a small block Chevy, you need the FelPro 3556 2T. This gasket will change your life. So when I replaced the thermostat, got the car back up and running, filled the cooling system with water. Yeah, water, remember, drag car, don't fry me too hard. Following track rules. What I found is that the temperature just started to climb and continued to climb and never really stopped. And I couldn't figure out why. So, doing what anybody would do, I took it all back apart. And at the time I was using the basic common blue FelPro gasket and silicone. So, had to get some new gaskets, all that kind of stuff. That's where the FelPro gasket, the reusable one, comes in, and believe me, that's a game changer right there. So, I thought, okay, maybe it's just something wrong. Maybe I did something wrong on the install. Maybe something's funny. Maybe the thermostat's not opening correctly. So I took the thermostat inside, in the house. Yes, I used one of my wife's pans to verify the correct operation of the thermostat with a non-contact thermometer and made sure that it opened at the temperature that I wanted. Well, what I found is this guy was actually about 10 degrees behind where he was supposed to be. I was trying to run a 160 in this, and it was opening about 10 thousandths or so at 160, and it wasn't fully open until closer to 185. So it was already hotter than I would want to see anyway. So I thought, all right, that's fine. Let's try this one more time. Put it back in, except this time I put one little tiny pinhole in it to help bleed any air in it, because I thought maybe it's got an air bubble in it. Little did I know, it wasn't an air bubble. So on the second go around, I thought, okay, let's give this a try. Same problem occurred. Temperature just climbed. I shut it off around 210 so it wouldn't get too hot. And I noticed something. The air coming off my electric fan wasn't particularly hot. It wasn't enough to tickle the thermostat that's in there, which should kick the fan on around 160 degrees at the radiator. The air coming off the radiator just wasn't that hot, and forcing my fan into manual mode didn't really, cool the engine much at all. So my next thought is, okay, fine. Let's swap it off for an OE style normal volume thermostat. This happens to be a Duralast Gold. I figured I'd get a nice one, and I did put 2 little bleeder holes in it just because that seemed like a good idea based on all the recommendations I'd been seeing around the internet for high performance cars. So I put this guy in. You know what happened? Yeah, exactly the same problem occurred. I thought it was because the water neck was so shrouded that it wasn't allowing water to flow up to the thermostat, and that by, unshrouding it like this, it was going to have the results that I needed. But now that started to open a loop of, man, what could be wrong? Is there something going on? Do I have a head gasket going bad? Is my water pump even working? Well, I quickly ruled out a head gasket because the oil is just fine. The combustion pressure is staying where it was supposed to. So I was very certain it was not a head gasket, but the water pump. The only way that I knew, and I even got some recommendations from some friends of mine, to verify the water pump is good was to remove the thermostat. I took the thermostat out of the housing and just started it up. And in doing so, I was able to look right down the water neck and see that coolant, water in this case, was flowing like it was supposed to. Reach over, blip the throttle, give it a few RPM, and I could see that the coolant flow picked right up like you would expect it. So as you can see, this is just going through step by step. I was freaking out, of course, because I thought there was something horribly wrong with my car and I was getting frustrated and nothing was working. And I actually had to reach out to a friend of mine who is much cooler in the diagnostic situation than I am. Anyways, he talked me through it. He says, hey, let's just change one thing at a time and see what happens. You prove that the water pump is working, leave the thermostat out. Let's see what it does. Does it get warm? Does the temperature just spike? Do we see some other anomalies? So you know what I did? I said, okay, let's see what happens. Run it without a thermostat. And I've always heard that you should never run a car without thermostats because that makes it's going to get too hot, it's going to get too cold, things are going to fail. Oh my goodness, it's going to be the worst thing in the world. But you know something? The temperature slowly climbed. I had the fan in thermostat mode. As soon as it crested 160 degrees on the gauge, the thermostatic fan kicked on. Kicked on just like it's supposed to. I got good hot air off the radiator, and it cooled it down. It cooled it right down till the fan kicked off just on the low side of 150 degrees. And I'm like, wow, I never thought that would happen quite that way. So I actually, watched it. I'm sitting here like, beside myself, watching the car idle, and the temperature kicks back up to high side of 160. Thermostat fan kicks on, cools it right back down. This time I'm like, no. I got to see this for myself one more time. You know what it did a third time? Exactly the same thing it did the first two times. So what I've learned is that this new intake manifold arrangement with this engine specifically has a problem with thermostats. I never thought I would come across a car engine combination that would ever have a problem with a thermostat, yet I have. So I asked the question of the friend of mine that's helping me, and he's a professional mechanic, owns his own shop. The dude is brilliant. I said, okay, so it's running fine, it's circulating, it's doing the things, it's actually cooling itself off. What happens if I just, tried to street drive it without a thermostat in it? He says, oh, if you're going down the road, with air moving over the radiator, it probably wouldn't actually get up to temperature. I'm like, interesting. Because I actually had a thermostat fail on two different vehicles. One of them, it got hot, but there's a reason for that. The second one, the heater never warmed up. It was my Buick Regal in the wintertime. The thermostat failed and it just got on the highway and got cold. The other one, well, the thermostat decided it was going to taco itself and barf parts everywhere and actually clogged up the water neck, so water wasn't flowing past it. So that's a obvious reason why that one failed and the car got hot, coolant wasn't getting by. But what that tells me is the common knowledge of you got to have a thermostat may not necessarily be right. And okay, this is my bracket car, this is my drag car. I don't ever expect this to see much street time, so I'm not sure I would be comfortable running without a thermostat on the street at this time. However, they do make things called coolant flow restrictors. They're about yay big with various hole sizes in the middle. The circle track guys use them all the time to be able to tailor the engine temperature to the range that they're looking for. So I think I'm going to pick up a pack of those and experiment with this, because with that reusable gasket, it's easy to do. It's just water. I can dump water out. I can pop a new one in. I can play with it. I can experiment with it. And I can truly see what happens. So I have to embrace my curiosity here and allow myself to be able to play with this and see what happens. As I've gone on through life, there are times where I honestly forget about that natural curiosity and just freak out because it's not working the way I want it to. Where if I had just taken 5 minutes and gone, okay, let's work through this step by step, I would have come to the answer. And I appreciate those that I've worked with and reached out to and talked with on this issue. This is one of those things that drove me absolutely crazy, and it shouldn't have. And it doesn't have to drive you crazy, just as long as you take it one step at a time to be able to solve the problems. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.